Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's session. And today's session is themed Beyond the Cloud, Sovereign AI, Governance, and the Future of Intelligence Enterprise in Nigeria and Africa. My name is Olamide Daniel, and I'm not doing this alone. Victoria Olujobi will be co-hosting this session with me. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Olamide. It's nice doing this with you.
It's nice doing this with you too. So I am a media communication professional with experience in technology, media, content creation, stakeholder engagement, and I currently serve as a presenter and content creator at Africa Tech Radio, where I host programs, create digital content, and simplify complex technology and innovation topics for diverse audiences. Victoria is the communication and programs coordinator at Kleinfeld LP, where she leads initiatives that leverage digital literacy and emerging technologies for social impact. So while preparing for this session, I came across a recent CBN, that's Central Bank of Nigeria's directive that's requiring financial institutions to localize payments data within Nigeria. And on the surface, it looks like a regular compliance announcement, but in actuality, it reflects a much bigger shift around data, infrastructure, and control. At the same time, AI adoption across Nigeria's enterprise is accelerating, but many organizations are still struggling to move from experimentation to secure, governed, and scalable production system. And this has created a clear gap between AI ambition and AI readiness. And it's driven by concerns around data residency, compliance, and dependency on external infrastructure. That tension is what makes today's conversation about sovereign AI so important. Because once you start asking who controls data, infrastructure, and intelligence systems, we are really talking about control, resilience, and digital sovereignty. And that is the conversation that we're having today.
Now, let me introduce our distinguished panelists for today. We are joined today by two distinguished speakers bringing expertise from the world of innovation, AI infrastructure, and digital transformation. First, we have Toyin Bamidele, a technical lead for innovation and digital economy development at United Nations Development Programme, UNDP Nigeria. Toyin works at the intersection of innovation, digital transformation, entrepreneurship, and emerging technologies, helping governments, institutions, startups, and development partners leverage technology for sustainable development. With experience in innovation ecosystem, digital skills, startup acceleration, public sector transformation, and AI for development, he has led and supported initiatives across Nigeria and Africa. He is the author of the Venture Metrics for the Future of Africa and is recognized for connecting policy, technology, and development to drive socio-economic impacts. Please join me in giving Toyin a warm virtual round of applause on the chat or with your reaction emoji. We are excited to learn from his insights and experience today.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. And joining in is Theophilus Uvikuberi, please pardon me, an AI infrastructure engineer and distributed system engineer with deep expertise in building manageable, scalable, resilient, and high-performance technology platform. He is highly skilled in Go and has growing proficiency in Rust, with extensive knowledge of Linux system, networking, Kubernetes internals, and modern AI infrastructure. His work focuses on designing robust designated systems and enabling organizations to deploy and operate cloud-native and AI-powered solutions at scale. Please give Theophilus a warm virtual welcome, as well with your reaction and applause on the chat. We are delighted to have him share his knowledge and practical perspective with us.
Thank you.
Theophilus, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. We are actually honored to have two amazing speakers who will be joining this conversation, and we look forward to an engaging and insightful section. You're welcome, everyone, once again. And you can drop your questions in the chat box or write them down. Our speakers will answer at the end of the session. Also do well to look through the poll and also give your feedback on that as well, as this will help for the conversation that we are going to be having today. Toyin and Theophilus, thank you both for making the time to share your expertise and insights with us. I'm sure the audience is definitely in for an exciting conversation. Without further ado, let's dive right in. So, Toyin, I would like to start with you. The term sovereign AI is becoming increasingly common in policy, enterprise conversations, but many organizations are still trying to understand what it means in practical terms. So, Toyin, from where you sit at the UNDP, why has sovereign AI transitioned from a private corporate tech choice into an absolute strategic necessity for Nigerians' broad digital economy?
All right. Thank you very much for that question, Victoria. Interestingly, especially in the world of technology, nothing is ever really new, right? So the conversation around AI's role in the digital economy has actually been around for a while. I think the real question is, why is it now mainstream? Why is it now very pronounced? I think that it's now well pronounced because Nigeria is in an inflection point in the development of its digital economy. We are in a phase where we need to focus on ensuring that the foundational resources, the foundational principles, the foundational things like infrastructure, talent development, structures for capital flow, and all of that are properly set. You know, in the space, we normally call this the defining decade, right? Which is the fourth industrial revolution. So Nigeria is currently positioning to play in that space, and AI is one of the foundational technologies that are driving the fourth industrial revolution. So it's no longer just a conversation around a private sector choice, but it's now becoming a foundational pillar for the development of the digital economy. So I think that's why it's now more pronounced. Now, the second reason is because we are living in this transition to a digital economy, especially in not just Nigeria, but in Africa. There is a need to always consider the developmental context. And this is why we are living in a more integrated world. For example, when you were talking about the last industrial revolution, we're talking about the internet age, you were talking just about the technology. But in today's world where it's about AI, we're not just, when you talk about AI, it's not just about AI anymore. We're talking about things like utility. We're talking things like water, for example. Like it's interesting how we're thinking of a technology and we're considering water consumption. We're thinking of technology and we're talking about energy consumption. We're thinking of technology and we're talking about minerals. So we're living in a more integrated world. It's making things more complex. So that is why private sector and its role in advancing the technology is not enough anymore. Every player now needs to get involved and take a more active step in shaping what AI can become and how it contributes to how Nigeria and Africa in general transitions into the digital economy. Thank you very much.
When you've spoken about the fourth in technology innovation, if I got that correctly, industrialization,
Industrial revolution.
industrial revolution, perfect. And we've spoken about like the new considerations that we have to take towards use of technology, more like energy, minerals, water, and so on. So what do you think is the biggest threat to Nigeria's long-term economic competitiveness if critical data and AI workloads remain dependent on foreign-owned infrastructure?
All right, fantastic. Now, within this space, there is one resounding, will I call it fear, right? Or one resounding risk. There are different layers of risk, but I'll just talk about one that is most prominent, and it is data colonialism, right? You know, we Nigerians, as a part of the broader African community, we share a history of colonialism, which continues to, you know, it rears its ugly head some way, somehow, every single time, every era, right? Now that we're in the era driven by AI, and you can't discuss AI without discussing data, the real risk right now is around data colonialism. But the conversation needs to be very well structured. It's not about where the data resides. So it's about data ownership and data control. So sovereign AI is really about control and ownership more than residency or minimization. Yes, those are infrastructural or systematic things that you consider in place. But in the kind of world where, for example, as I said, when you're talking about AI, you're talking about minerals, you're talking about water, you're talking about, and you understand that these are not evenly distributed resources, you start to see that prevailing conversations around distributed compute, for example, are the conversations, right? So AI sovereignty in today's context is not just about residency. It's about control. It's about collaboration and of course, innovation as well, because new problems will continue to emerge. And you want to be sure that all of your guardrails, all of the systems you put in place do not now restrict you from being innovative. And as you can see, geopolitics is also becoming more integrated. Before, things that you just read on the news, you're just reading on the news. But now you're reading about war in Ukraine. It's affecting the price of tomato in your markets. We're living in, as I said, we're living in a very, very integrated world, right? So I think data colonialism is what poses the biggest risk, because Africa right now in the global context plays a very unique role. Number one, we're the largest community of Black people in the world. We're also home to the youngest population. I think by 2030, I think about 3 in 10 people in the world, would be in Africa. I think it's higher than that. I'm trying to be conservative. So the conversation is really that Africa is a major part of defining what the future would be. And we need to take an active role as not as spectators, but as active participants in shaping what that will be. So the whole thing around creating systems that ensure that no matter where the data is resident, we own our sovereignty by ensuring that we own the data and we control what happens to the data, how it is used. We ensure that we also create collaborative frameworks, which I think is a more interesting conversation to be having. How do we design our own indigenous collaborative frameworks to ensure that sovereign AI is not hindered by this whole residency conversation, where should you reside and things like that? So I think that is really the conversation that's happening within the industry, and especially from a development perspective, poses the greatest risks.
All right. Looking at this conversation, Toyin, you made mention of taking active participation and owning data. So I would like to throw this question next to Theophilus, who is an AI infrastructure engineer. Theophilus, what is the honest state of Nigerian compute and connectivity infrastructure today? And what must change technically to make local sovereign data stacks operationally and viable at large scale, looking at the fact that data colonialism now is a major challenge for Nigerians?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I would love to answer that question in 3 layers. The first being the connectivity layer, your compute layer, and of course, operational maturity. So before I go further, truth is the Nigerian ecosystem has seen a lot of growth in terms of connectivity and compute infrastructure. We have tier 3 data centers coming up in Nigeria. Data centers are improving. We have growing fiber connectivity, and a lot of companies and organizations are embracing cloud adoption, cloud technologies right now, and there's an increase in enterprise digitalization, right? And of course, regional cloud providers are springing up in Nigeria. We saw MTN Cloud. So coming back to the layers, the connectivity layer is fine. We have a lot of progress there now, right? We have the submarine cable connection that connects Nigeria to the world outside. We have the fiber connectivity, the network in Nigeria. We have enterprise MPLS networks that exist. So our challenge is not really on the connectivity layer anymore. The real challenge or the real bottleneck is in the compute, right? When you talk about AI workloads, we're not talking about websites or web applications that you simply want to run. AI workloads really require a lot of GPUs. I mean, expensive GPUs, right? NVMe storages. We have high-speed networking, right? Cooling and power density. Essentially, this infrastructure do not exist yet locally in Nigeria. And of course, the third layer will be operational maturity, right? A lot of organizations treat observability as a nice to have, right? Not must to have, you know. Data governance, cataloging, machine learning operations, we're not matured here yet in this layer. And without this, we can't really say sovereign AI really exists. So data colonization will still happen. So what must change? I believe hyperscale compute must really increase. I mean, on a hyperscale level, compute is like what electricity was to the industrial revolution is what compute is to AI, right? The AI age that we're in right now. Sufficient GPU capacity, I mean, hardware capacity, GPUs to be specific, must really improve. And then power stability. It is very expensive for you to build a data center and then you want to build your off-grid power system. You know, the on-grid power system, unfortunately, is laden with a lot of problems, right? When I was in university, I studied electrical electronics engineering in school, and one of my core focus was power systems. One of my projects was really on the transmission grid. It is very, very difficult to get reliable power from it. It will need a lot of investment. So power instability must really be taken out of the way if we're going to change anything technically to really improve local surveying data stacks, right? Finally, we need to build more AI-ready data centers. Most of the data centers we have are really just for generic workloads. So a lot of investments will still need to go in before we can have that technical breakthrough. That's so in a nutshell, I would say our challenge in Nigeria is no longer really connectivity, right? Our real bottleneck is in compute. We don't have the compute density, we don't have the reliable power, and we don't have the AI-ready infrastructure. If these things are put in place, then we can say, okay, we're moving to the next level. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Theophilus. You mentioned a lot about the importance of compute to AI, and also mentioned that our issue in Nigeria now is not so much a connectivity issue, it's more of a compute issue. So the question I have for you is, how much does this compute deficit actually limit our ability to move from being simple passive consumers of foreign AI software to becoming active independent builders of deep tech system?
Okay, that's a very, very important question. Allow me break the AI into two categories, right? We have AI inferencing. On a technical level, we have AI inference, and then we have AI training. When we talk about inference, we mean that you're getting the model to make predictions. You have a trained or a pre-trained model, and then you're getting it to make predictions or generate outputs, right? But for you to do that, you need to host that model. That requires hardware, that requires your inference engine, and then of course your deployment framework, right? So the compute deficiency doesn't really eliminate the opportunity to build, right? Although because the compute is not there, we can't really do a lot of experiments. When you have the compute, you can experiment more, you can build more, you can train talents faster, you can retain intellectual property. For example, Anthropic was on the verge of, okay, they released Fable 5, right? And they were planning on releasing Myotos 5. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I have a very bad problem with pronouncing. But you see, the US government said, oh no, you can't release this out. Export control. You have the compute, you can build these systems and then retain that intellectual property. Countries that do not have that compute power, the best you can do is to consume APIs. Either you're consuming APIs or and then you have to export data out, and then you now have to import intelligence. For example, if you want to run your models locally, you have to import that intelligence, right? So the compute deficit really slows us down, to be completely honest, but it doesn't eliminate our opportunity to build, right? The key is we can still build the rack systems, we can still build the AI agents, the vertical AI, the fintech, the agricultural AI, the health AI, without really building ChatGPT 6 or GPT-6 or the next foundational model, right? So because we can still do AI inferencing, but AI training, for AI training, for training models, you need a lot of GPUs, you need a lot of compute, hyperscale volume for that. So since we can't do that right now in Nigeria, there is a layer where we can master. You know, back in those days, or as it is right now, nobody expects Nigeria to build CPU chips or GPU chips before we started building software companies. In same vein, we don't need to train a trillion parameter model before you start building AI businesses, right? So we can build the APIs on top of it. We can host those models. At least the computer infrastructure we have can host those models locally. We can import those models, and then since we have data stored locally, we can interface all of these things and still have something tangible going. But say we want to build a 70 billion parameter model or this or that cannot work. So yes, that's my answer to that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Theophilus, for the answer. You mentioned one of the problem being compute deficit. So I'll be throwing this to Toyin and looking at this at the limitations that we have in actually importing intelligence to make sure this works. So Toyin, looking at the fact that data localization is often misconstrued, how can Nigeria effectively enforce strict data residency guardrails to protect citizen and national security data while keeping our digital public infrastructure highly attractive to international venture capital?
There are different ways that we can ensure that data residency, let's say this data residency actually translates to impact on the everyday populace. I think first of all is to ensure that we properly define the context for what data residency is. And with the same normal issues we have with policy, right, is that the policies around this, number one, should be very clear. To also be they should be co-created, right? Because when it's not co-created, especially on topics like AI, which, is an evolving topic, is very niche, right? Every different stakeholders have varying degrees of understanding based on their interaction with the technology, its concepts, its ecosystems, and things like that. Co-creation is non-negotiable. So I think the more policymakers continue to interact with private sector, continue to interact with development actors, continue to co-create what this frameworks, what this policy should be, I think that we'll be able to translate impact for the everyday Nigerian. The second thing is we must ensure that, and this is not just about data residency, but I like that you mentioned the digital public infrastructure. Safeguards, guardrails need to be by design and not as an afterthought. Because one critical factor that influences adoption, and I don't even mean just consumer adoption, but even adoption by builders, by people who are creating the economic vehicles that are translating this AI into productive solutions or productive entities, productive tools, actually require trust. Number one, that they need to trust that their government is going to ensure that the policies are enabling. Consumers want to trust that the people that are building these tools are not trying to exploit their data for purely economic gains or, and things like that. So trust is the foundation for translating adoption to impact. And how do you ensure that trust exists? Is by ensuring that when it comes to anything related to our digital public infrastructure, safeguards are by design and not as an afterthought. And I'm going to make a case for this with one more thing. Now, when you look at the history or when you look at different case studies, especially around digital public infrastructure, data exchange systems that enable digital public infrastructure, you find out that technology always, as is normal, as is the natural occurrence, technology always moves faster. It looks like technology is the most complex, but people figure out technology really quickly, or they design, at least, because we have an interesting iterative model of development in the technology space, it means that you don't even have to get things perfectly before they are functional. So meaning that people can meet today, by next week, even if they don't have something they can deploy, they have the design already. So it is easy to design, it is easy to deploy, but the one that people now they take as an afterthought, maybe because you do not see the gains as quickly, is the things that actually get you the trust, which is ensuring that there are safeguards. For example, UNDP has a global safeguarding mechanism built on how do you create inclusive data sharing, effective data governance, and things like that. How do you ensure that safeguards are implemented? How do you ensure that there is dispute resolution involved in data residency issues, for example? How do you ensure that there's compliance with the policies and things like that? So those things, I think they require more time, and they should even go first before we even start taking on, okay, what technology, interoperability, those are normal technical issues that happen within this space. So I think that, in one sentence, what would translate data residency, or for more technical terms, the policies around that into impact, is ensuring that it is by design accompanied by safeguards and guardrails.
Thank you very much. Okay. So for this, I'll be talking to Theophilus, because Tony mentioned something about trust, and also mentioned the safeguards, the guardrails, and this will be linking me to my next question to Theophilus. And the question is, how can enterprises use global hyperscale platform while keeping sensitive data under local sovereign control, especially in a fragmented market where data must be localized, audited for bias, and kept safe from day one?
From a technical standpoint, the solution to that problem, or the right approach, would be hybrid AI architecture, right? Your data, what is your data? Your data, what should stay local? When I mean hybrid architecture, a part of it stays locally, a part of it can stay in the global hyperscaler network, right? So in that way, your data that is local doesn't move over the border, but the model or the compute process comes locally. So when we talk about local data, we mean your customer data, your PII, your financial records, your healthcare data, and regulated information. This has to stay locally. It's an architecture, hybrid, right? You could build a network, or you could build a hybrid system where you have your data, you have some compute locally, maybe your databases are local, and then you have your compute infrastructure in the cloud, and then you're connecting through a site-to-site VPN or whatever the connection, right? We can use the global cloud infrastructure to train models, right? We can get access to elastic compute. We can do a lot of experimentation, right? In those in those kind of environments, burst workloads. But our data has to stay locally. And how do you go around this? We have data masking, right? When you mask your data, you have federated learning, you have your confidential computing, your RAG architecture, and you could even host your models, right? You could host your models locally, you keep your data locally. So let's use a bank, for example. Let's come to a real world scenario. Let's say a bank wants to build a system, right? They need a model and they have their data. Your customer record are here in Lagos. Your databases are here. You can deploy your local vector databases, and then you use your local RAG, and then your models are here, right? Your models can be here, or you can even decide your models are running on the cloud environment, and then you're making external calls to those models with sanitized context. Yeah. So the solution would be a hybrid system. Data stays locally, and since we don't have the compute locally, or we don't have that capacity right now, we could use the global available compute in cloud environments and all of those. But like I said, the model comes to the data. The data does not go over the border to the model. And again, data residency is not isolation, right? We're not isolating ourselves. We're not building and saying, oh, we're isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. No, we're just ensuring that data security is national security, right? It's national security, and we want to keep it that way. We want to keep it safe. We don't want it to be in the wrong hands. We want to control the data, right? We want to control the infrastructure where this data is. We want to be the ones to build it. We want to observe it. We want to monitor it. It is here with us, right? So that's my answer to that question. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Theophilus, for that answer. So, Theophilus, we've talked about how we can actually use this hybrid architecture to ensure this. So the next question I have for you right here is, if a regulated enterprise wanted to eliminate dependency risks today, so today they want to eliminate dependency risks, which three critical technology dependencies would you advise them to decouple from first in case of a geopolitical shift?
Okay, so, geopolitics is really, really wild. Anything can happen. Somebody doesn't like your president, or our government falls in the wrong line with another government, or, those kind of things. We've seen it happen in global politics. If I was sitting as an architect in an enterprise, one of the first things I would want to decouple is my identity systems, right? We're talking about the systems that you're using for authentication and authorization, like your Active Directory, your IAM, and whatever it is you're using to run authentication. You're used to provide authentication for your employees and for your partners. I believe an organization should have total control over that system. I would want to decouple it immediately. The next on my list will be data platforms, right? Whatever platform my data is sitting on, we're talking about databases, we're talking about storages, data lakes. My data platforms must be portable, right? If anything happens tomorrow and the US government says this, that, don't provide, a ban happens, for example, I should be able to have my data or data platforms in some other place locally where I can easily move it, right? And a ban doesn't just lock me out of business. Then finally, AI models, right? I will not depend on one provider, right? Like an LLM vendor, like Anthropic or Cloudly, or it has to be a mix, right? It has to be a mix. You have not just from a single vendor, you have multiple vendors, you have free models, right? Like your DeepSeek. So you're not just reliant on a single vendor or a vendor from a geopolitical zone, for example, from the US, right? So you just find a way to decouple these things. Those would be like three things I would really want to decouple, three systems I would really want to decouple quickly, right? So if anything happens, we're not really, really affected. You understand? So there's a saying in a technical world, right? Your sovereignty is really, really, really determined by your exit strategy. Can I exit from a vendor and not really have problems? If I try to leave, for example, a hyperscaler today, will it be a problem to my business? If it will be a problem to your business, then it means there is vendor lock-in. You have a vendor lock-in problem. And as an architect, I would really want to avoid that. So yeah, those are the systems I would really want to quickly decouple.
Thank you to your class. You said something. You said that the politics is crazy, which it's really is
crazy.
because a lot is happening. In the words of them, things are happening. So this will lead me to my question to Dwayne, because this conversation around talent, brain drain, and a lot of things like that. But it's almost like we say, oh, most of our talents are being utilized by the foreigners. A lot of people are being employed abroad and whatever. So what policy considerations do you think are necessary to build a sustainable domestic environment that retains and properly deploys our own indigenous AI workforce?
I would like to reframe the conversation a bit. So I think that there is a general talent workforce challenge, right, within our ecosystem that now cuts across the AI talent workforce, is that we actually have the AI talent workforce. We just don't have them at scale. I think it's a demand and supply problem. We have them, we just don't have them to meet the demand. So to even now start saying that, there's also a Japa syndrome, I think it's too early to call, because we don't even have sufficient for our current ecosystem, right? So, of course, kudos to the government of Nigeria, the 3MTT, that's an interesting model being explored to be able to address that workforce development at scale challenge. But however, I think that especially for the AI context, I think we need more infrastructure focused approaches, right? So let me give you an example for something that we're doing at the United Nations Development Programs, right? So we have programs like the Unipod, the University Innovation Pods, that are actually bridging the gap between not just academia and industry, but academia, industry, development, and government, right? And what it's doing is that, for example, we have an AI Unipod in Unilag right now, where, for example, you can actually, it's like a one-stop shop for everything AI development, right? So that model, for example, is in its early days, but it's proven to work as a catalyst for AI workforce development at scale. Because if you actually think about it, we do not actually have, okay, let me not say it like that. We have a skill problem, but the skill problem is not it's not something we cannot solve, because we're a smart people, we're a resourceful continent. Skill at scale is now being enabled by that access to technology. And as Theophilus said, the connectivity issue is not as prominent or as pronounced as before. So there's access, there's even ChatGPT, the free open source platforms are able to enable skill and things like that. But how do you translate skill into productivity? You now start to see that there's a gap, especially when it comes to innovation, technology development, is that there are not a lot of investments or enough investments in the right infrastructure and equipment needed to actually translate that knowledge into practical use. The active player doing that is the private sector. But as I said, at scale, when you start to look at the costs, the cost to benefit analysis, there's not enough strong business case for that. So I think that policy direction right now should go around, how do we create an infrastructure focused or infrastructure driven AI workforce development framework or policy that enables us to convert, everyday infrastructure into AI development or AI workforce development structures. How do we ensure that we create more access to equipment? For example, I know how much was spent on just deploying our Unipods. We currently have about 7 Unipods across the country, growing to about 10, and then we're establishing partnerships to scale that to about 30, 40. So we understand the cost implication of that, right? So how do we bring down that cost through strategic partnerships, through private sector engagement and things like that? It's a model that is proving to work, in this whole workforce development context. Now, AI being a frontier conversation presents the opportunity to do that as well. And if you notice, it's a thing that is going on. For example, in Unilag, I know that they have about 2 to 3 AI focused infrastructure driven provisions within the school. It's now becoming a model. So I think that kind of direction is where we can take. NVIDIA, for example, is doing some good work providing compute. But there are not a lot of uptakers because the kind of infrastructure to be able to leverage such compute, we don't have enough of them. So I think for the policy direction, we need more infrastructure-focused AI development type of models. And I think that, not to brag, but UNDP is providing, that case for it, right? And it's something that you can go and touch and see and experience for yourself.
All right. Looking at this collaboration now, private-public collaboration and also regional leadership. So, Tony, what is the role of development actors in facilitating public-private partnership within the context of this conversation? I know you've mentioned some while you were trying to explain the last question, so I just want you to shed more light on, please. Thank you.
All right. So one thing that happens during technological revolutions is its impact on the socioeconomic and development fabric of, where it's happening. For example, while we're celebrating, AI, that we're also on the other hand talking about job loss. People lose jobs. We always make the argument and say, but AI will create a lot more jobs. Okay, yeah, that's just half of the story. Yes, it will create a lot more jobs, but then there's the cost of access to these new jobs. Who is going to take up the cost of reskilling? Who's going to take up the cost of upskilling? jobs are not just jobs, they are livelihoods. Jobs are not just jobs, they are representation of economic vehicles. So even the whole economic interests that we are so excited about, that we are, we get very excited about, which is, productivity, how do we make money and all of that. It is really dependent on the market conditions, which is how digitally literate are the people who you are building these solutions for. What's the cost of access to this connectivity that Theophilus is saying is now more readily available? So those are the development conversations. So the role of development actors like us is to actually do two things. Number one, ensure that we always account for the development context as we take on these bold conversations, around technology and how it's impacting our economy, right? What is the development context? How is this translated to job creation? How are we ensuring that the socioeconomic structures of the communities being impacted are retained? How do we ensure that communities become more resilient? How do we ensure that the use of AI is ethical? How do we ensure that AI governance is inclusive? These are the conversations that when you're building the technology, it's not sweet in the mouth, right? But these are the things that really define how much the technology can do and how much good the technology can actually do. So that is the role that we play. But more importantly as well, we play an even stronger role, which is we de-risk the cost of exploration, right? For example, there are things that private sector will never touch because it doesn't make sense in terms of, money and, as I mentioned, who's going to take up the costs of upskilling? Who's going to take up, and, all of those kind of costs, private sector will be asking, every $1 I'm putting has to get me $2 back, at least get me my $1 back, even if I'm doing it for impact, and things like that. What development actors do is to now experiment, or for lack of better words, maybe experiment doesn't capture it properly, explore. So what we do is we explore models that every other partner or every other player might find too risky, right? So for example, the Nigerian Jubilee Fellows program that we're doing, is a frontier program around enabling young people to get access to livelihoods, but not just livelihoods, career acceleration through placements. So it's not a model that's, if you look at every other actor, it's not something that they can easily try. But we're the ones who say, okay, we'll do it on our behalf. When we see the success stories, okay, everybody now starts to say, okay, this is how we want to participate. We create that room for collaboration across the ecosystem. Most times when we complain, we don't see enough collaborations in the ecosystem, is because, those models for those collaborations do not exist. How would a development, for example, how would academia, for example, partner with government beyond research and development? Who is going to answer that question? That's why you need development actors to explore models, to de-risk that conversation, to de-risk that cost and say, okay, we are going to design something around this and help you identify, or not help you, but, show you the roles you can play and to ensure that everybody feels, everybody gets the return, for lack of better words, return on the dividends of the efforts that, we are actually putting in. So that's the role we play in facilitating public-private, but not just public-private, but every ecosystem player that needs to be involved in the conversation at each particular time as we develop this technological reality, but more importantly, transition into a digital economy, an economy that's actually powered by digital, by intelligence. Now we're now in the intelligence era. We've even passed the digital era now. We're now in the intelligence era. So the things that power that, right? That's the role that development actors actually play.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Thank you very much, Theophilus. It's been a very interesting conversation. And one thing I've held on to throughout the conversation is the conversation that the part where Theophilus spoke about artifacts. We don't have a connectivity issue. We have a compute issue. And Toyin has also spoken extensively about talent and also about public and private collaboration, where we have to find more ways to collaborate. And he also made the example of academia partnering with the government. Usually when these partnerships happen, there's always more research above every other thing. So what other ways can the private sector and the public sector collaborate with each other? And this will lead me to the final question. And this question is for both Theophilus and Tony, but Theophilus should go first. So if you could actually isolate exactly one clear milestone, I mean, you can maybe more than one milestone, but at least one milestone. So it could be a policy milestone, a specific infrastructure investment, or a mindset shift that will move Nigeria's sovereign AI agenda forward most effectively in the next 24 months. Yes.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, I think the milestone I would suggest would be is the establishment of an AI compute facility in strategic universities, right? Like Tony said, we are at a very, very strategic junction now. And if we need to lead this revolution, it has already begun, right? If we need to onboard a lot of Nigerians on it, we have the numbers, right? We need to take it down to the academia, right? The young ones that young boy, that young girl that is studying computer science, right? If an AI compute facility is established, like the pod Tony is talking about, now it's done with national intervention. It becomes a priority to the government. You know, when you have stuff like you have GPU clusters, you have AI supercomputing, you have research access, right? You can create a facility like that can create access for students, university access, enterprise access. It becomes a center of intelligence or a center of excellence, sort of, right? Why? Because if you give it 24 months period, this is going to develop talent. It's going to speed up research, and it's also going to create startups. Like you're going to see AI startups everywhere, right? And I mean, Nigerians are very, very hardworking and intelligent people, right? We'll see products rolling out, like a lot of innovations and products rolling out. So that would be the milestone I could think of. Another thing, so let me just sneak this little one in. We could also provide subsidy. The government could provide subsidy, right, to data centers. I mean, people wanting to build these AI-ready data centers. GPUs are very, very expensive. You could lift the custom charges and fees on importing this critical computer infrastructure, right? Give them incentive to maybe tax breaks or whatever it could be to build the systems in Nigeria to foster the development, foster that development. You know, we have the talent, we have the hungry people, young people that are hungry and are willing to learn, but when you fire up a server on, I don't want to mention any brand, but you fire up a server in any of these hyperscalers, you know the money. If you're not doing it on credits that are allocated to you, it's a lot of money, right? And it's not everybody, even students in universities would not really want to go down that route. You want to learn this thing, you're hyped up for it, but you look at the economics behind it and you're like, you know what? I would change the name of my research project, of my research topic. You know, when you think about the money, involved, no, okay. You know what? Using AI, you will have to find a way to change it, right? But the guy wants to go deeper into research, but he looks at the economics and everything. There is no access to a facility where you can do this, you can do that. And you just think about it like, it'd be like, say, I would have to just find a way to tune it down, just find research papers to stitch them together and move forward. So yeah, that would be what I would propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Theophilus. So Theophilus has said build compute centers in universities as well as give subsidies to people. So Tony, what do you think? One, policy, mindset shift, structural infrastructure.
So for me, right, from a development standpoint, and considering where we are, I think a critical milestone that we need to hit as a nation in this sovereign AI conversation is our digital public infrastructure, right? Those foundational rails, we've made a lot of advancements in the payments rail. We're making some considerable advancements in the identity rail. Now data exchange, right, is now the conversation. So I think that a big milestone for sovereignty. So when you look at it as an ecosystem, right, in terms of sovereignty, so like Theophilus mentioned, infrastructure, talent development, capital deployment, and all of that How we unlock all of that value is by ensuring that we have a digital public infrastructure that provides that foundational layer for innovation and integration and all of these things to happen. We increase our adoption, for example, on digital identity. When we're talking about a national digital or a national cybersecurity architecture, like it's easier, right, to think around in terms of what solutions you want to deploy, because what identity now can be, we now have a one sort of truth for what the identity or the digital representation of every Nigerian is, right? In a way that's inclusive, is not restrictive, is not prohibitive, it doesn't infringe on rights, it doesn't infringe on access to justice and, institutional capacity to actually protect the rights of the citizens of the country. Once we can achieve that inclusive status or stature, right, of our DPI, I think that's a milestone that would really accelerate our sovereign AI journey.
Thank you very much, Theophilus. This has been a wonderful conversation, as well as Tony. Thank you for the rich and insightful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners, our audience have also learned a lot. So today's conversation has reinforced an important reality, which is that sovereign AI is not simply about where our server sits or where our data is stored. It's about building the capacity, the governance structure, the infrastructure, the talents and partnership that allows Nigeria and even Africa at large to participate in the AI economy on its own terms. So I hope this conversation today have provided practical insights and has sparked new ideas for how organizations can approach AI adoption with resilience, governance, and long-term strategic thinking. So thank you very much once again, Theophilus and Tony, for this wonderful insights.
Thank you very much. We have some questions in the comment section, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so we would like to take those questions now. So if you have questions, you can still drop them in the chat box. We'll be diving straight to those questions because some people have dropped their questions already. And if you have not taken the poll questions yet, please do well to do that. So for the first question we have here, and I think this should actually go to Theophilus. For the first question, it says, the cost of frontier AI model compute, especially interfacing, is getting expensive and set to increase in monetary costs over the next few years. What are the ways enterprise and every AI workload users can explore or use to access quality interfacing, but a significant lesser cost? So this person is asking how enterprise and every AI workload users can navigate quality interface at a lower cost. I think Theophilus also mentioned something about subsidy while he was speaking. So Theophilus, over to you.
Okay. What this person is trying to see, right, is from a user perspective. Let me paint the picture so it becomes very clear. What Meshach is trying to ask is, see, these models are getting expensive. You're using them to inferencing, you're using it to do work. You're basically generating outputs. They're literally becoming extremely expensive. And as the day goes by, the cost is rising. We're seeing news that the cost is going to increase for using Cloud Day. You're using it to build tokens are flying left, right, and center. And the next thing you're seeing, you're already $500,000 down. In cost, right? What can a business or a large enterprise do to lower that cost? That is essentially what he's asking, right? So there are multiple ways to tackle this problem, right? In fact, the first or one of the best approach is for you to host your models locally, right? Now, but hosting your models locally I'll take that to a next step. If you sit down in an organization or an enterprise and you look critically, it's not everything that requires complex reasoning. It's not every workload that has to do with complex reasoning. Organizations that use AI or AI models to work, many of the times, you don't use the large frontier models all the time, right? So I would favor a hybrid approach, right? Where you have smaller and specialized models for customer support, data classification, internal search, or fraud detection, and all those knowledge-based assistants, right? You can deploy a small 7 billion or 13 billion parameter model, and it's going to handle that business case, right? So examples like your Llama, your Mistral, and your Qwen, they can do all of that. You don't require to always use the frontier model. So what I would do is to separate my workload such that you could literally host or localize some of these models for inferencing, and you tie those kind of workloads you tie those smaller workloads to these small models, right? Another thing I would also do to reduce costs is where you bring in the RAG layer. That's your retrieval augmented generation, right? You bring it in. So instead of sending or making the model know everything, you could store enterprise knowledge locally, right? And you retrieve only the relevant information. You just send minimal context to the AI model, and that is going to reduce the cost significantly. Now, it's good that when you do this is going to reduce your token consumption, right? It's going to reduce the compute usage, and it's also going to reduce stuff like latency, right? I've talked about the hybrid architecture. There are other ways of really limiting the context that goes to the models. You can even introduce stuff like caching. And another strategy for large enterprises will be, large enterprises can come together and say, okay, we've imported these numbers of GPUs, these GPU instances, right? Maybe 500 or 1,000 of them, or depending on the type and grade. And we're going to do inference from these models. We'll host these models and then we do inference from them, right? You could lower the bill, especially since you're making your money in Naira, and then you're making your revenue in Naira and your expenses in dollars. You can say, okay, guys, we're doing this here. We're going to host our models here. Let's make these API calls to our models, and it's going to drastically reduce the price. So essentially, find a way to reduce the context going to the AI model, right? The communication around cost, the conversation around cost is still an extensive one. We don't have a strong foothold to say, okay, this is the way to do this, or this is the logical way to do this. It's still a big problem to every kind of organization, right? But eventually, as the years goes by, we're going to find a middle ground, right? We're going to find a sweet spot to say, okay, this is the way to really do it. But for now, these are some of the strategies you can deploy in an organization to see that you really reduce the cost of using these AI models. Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope I answered your question, Mishak.
All right, thank you very much, Theophilus. There's another question here, and I'll be throwing that right to you. And this is coming from someone who has never used AI before. So it says, as a business that has never used AI before, what is the very first step we should take?
A business that has never used AI before, the first question, if I'm a business owner, the first question would be, do I have a valid use case, a business use case for AI, to be honest? If I don't have a valid business use case for AI, it really falls in the category of nice to haves, right? But if you have a lot of repetitive tasks, AI is good at doing repetitive work, right? What requires repetitive intelligence, right? Yes, I would find a way to integrate it. If it means going to learn as a business owner, I believe you should have some level of knowledge into this thing, right? Or what is this AI thing? I can take some crash courses. How do I even use it in my business? It's like you trying to get your hands dirty, right? Oh, there is a chatbot. There are chatbots. There are intelligent layers. Oh, what are AI agents? What can I use AI agents to do in my business? You understand? But truly, if you've done the evaluation, you've learned about AIs, and you don't see there is no need for automation in this business, right? There is no need for it. Please don't over-engineer things. Just AI is good, but it doesn't really have a place in my business. Or better still, you get experts to come in. This is my business. This is my business processes. Look at it. Where can AI or automation come in to make things faster? All right. If there is a business case for it, you can find a way to really exploit it and bring in AI to do your work. But how are you going to do this? I will advise that you at least learn about AI from a business point of view. What can AI do? What are automation? You just maybe take a small short crash course over a weekend and you're really good to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sue. Because I think that's a very good first step for someone who is looking to start integrating AI to their business. So this question is for Toyin. The question says, should we be concerned about foreign investments in local AI startups?
I do not think we need to be concerned. It's just like also saying, should we be concerned that, most of our startups within our ecosystem are funded by foreign capital? It's a natural economic outcome. Capital flows where there's opportunity, right? But I think that what we need to do is we need to actively create the systems that make that happen, right? So, for example, we should design the programs that host, those facilities, the pipeline development mechanisms. We need to be the ones who design and control that. But capital is capital, so I don't think we need to be concerned, right? And the real conversation behind, the money is that the money buys equity. So it buys ownership, right? So it buys decision-making power, right? Within the context of how the startup. So it's the same. It's just that the difference is that now there is AI, we're a bit touchy about it, but AI startups are just also startups, right? But of course the difference now is that they play a more significant role on more, let's say touchy topics like national security. They are the pipeline through which data, flows and all of that. So I understand the question, but I don't think it's a thing around concern. It's more about how deliberate are we around creating the systems that direct how this capital flows and how this capital becomes equity. And what does equity actually mean, within the context of an AI startup compared to just, funny to say now, a traditional startup, because startups are not traditional, but now we have another level of of the innovation layer. So startups are also now, within the traditional box. So that's what I would rather, that's what I would say.
Hey, thank you very much. So this next question is also for you. So what consideration should be thought about when countries enter into partnerships with foreign partners or countries as it relates to AI? This is like a continuation of the question about the concern.
So when it comes to sovereignty, right? As I said, most times the conversation is around residency. But from an industry perspective, there are actually 6 layers to be considered, and not just about residency. We have things like key control, who can decrypt, authorize, or deny access control in itself, who can operate, view, support, or escalate the data realities, auditability, who has the rights, to actually not just review evidence of compliance, but actually activate compliance in itself. Portability. Who has that right, to move the data, to exit with it, or to just gain access to it and things. And then more important as well, recovery. Because as I said, the whole thing around residency is just one corner of the conversation. We can literally host all of our data. I'm just saying, just to make this point. So let's say we host all of our data here, right? Without having a recovery backup somewhere else. Yeah. Let's say one country attacks our distance and actually gains access, and captures our data, and there's nothing we can do. What is the recovery process? Because if it's resident within Nigeria, it means that it's also exposed to the same risk. But now, interestingly, these are not mainstream news, right? But interestingly, it's already happening. I think we already do residency for even Ghana, I think. Ghana's data, the data, for the citizens and things like that. So those are the levels that we need to actually consider, right? When you're talking about, sovereignty and its maturation within an ecosystem. So those are the things to be considered in response to the questions.
Okay, thank you. There's a question about whether a business should integrate AI.
If you feel take that one.
But I think that's been answered because he had mentioned that
yes.
you go ahead and just look for how AI can work in your business. So I think we can say that has been answered to a very large extent. He said to look for different AIs like chatbots and stuff and look at how it could be integrated with your business and all that. So the next question, definitely for Theophilus. The question is, with the increasing availability of AI models that can efficiently run on CPUs without requiring expensive GPUs, how do you see this changing the business landscape for startups and SMEs in the emerging markets? Could CPU and optimized AI become a key driver of AI adoption by reducing infrastructure costs and lowering barrier to entry? Theophilus.
So the whole AI ecosystem is still rapidly evolving, right? Don't forget, initially computing was really expensive at first, even in our computers today. At a point, only certain organizations could afford to buy these computers. Eventually, we will get to that point where you can run your AI models, right, in really small systems, compute systems, and it will really be totally fine. This is going to lower the barrier, but when is that going to happen? We don't know, right? And in the world of business, time is money, right? So, yes, it's going to reduce the infrastructural cost and lower the barriers to entry, no doubt. But when that is going to happen, we don't know for now, right? Everything is still unfolding before us, still unfolding right in our faces. So, like I said, yes, hopefully we can get to that point where I can just have one laptop and I'm running a real cool AI model. I'm running my own local AI model. I mean, very powerful model, and I'm doing my thing, So yes, that's a real possibility.
All right, thank you, Theophilus. I think we do have a similar question, so I'll just read it out. It says, given the high cost and limited availability of GPUs in many regions, particularly across Africa, how significant are CPU-operated AI models for accelerating digital transformation and AI-driven business innovations? What new business opportunities could this unlock for local enterprises?
A lot will really move. A lot will really change, right? I mean, we don't have to really depend on foundational models imported from abroad, right? We don't have to import some of these models from abroad. In fact, the game changer will be where we have capable or elite machines, right? We have PCs or we have smaller compute units that can enable us train models. Remember I said inference is a different ball game from training, right? Training is where the real work is where you need the real thing. Even if the cost reduces, right? I am not very certain. Nothing is cast on stone, but I'm not very certain we will get to that stage where you have a light machine as this, like your laptop, and you can train a model on it. Right? You can train a model, can train a very powerful model. I doubt. What we will still continue to have is being able to host those models locally, and then you inference from it, right? Will anything change in industry? Yes, a lot will change. At least you're able to just really host these things locally, and you get your business up and running. You don't have to pay so much, right? Yeah, so I think that would be a valid answer for it.
So we're gradually going to be wrapping up this Q&A section. But before we end this section, we have one more question for Toyin. And it says, Toyin, do you think the AFCFTA can redefine Africa's digital sovereignty agenda by using a continental model sovereign contract to move beyond the narrow focus on data and residency? So Toyin, this question is specifically for you.
So the answer is yes and no at the same time, in the sense that what the AFCFTA is not the blue pill, it's not the silver bullet for all of our intercontinental engagements, right? But what it does is that it provides a platform, it provides an accelerant, right, for all of those things to happen. What we need to bring that to fruition is to have frameworks, accompanying frameworks, protocols. That's why, when you talk about the AFCFTA, especially when you talk about digital, you hear a lot of things like protocols. For example, there's the digital trade protocol, that accompanies the AFCFTA. So it's in those frameworks that we actually now translate the potential of the AFCFTA to actual impact on, industry or, the end consumers. And now when it relates to digital sovereignty, right, I think that we need to explore what we call collaborative sovereignty frameworks for Africa to accompany the AFCFTA. I think it needs to be one of the emerging conversations that should really take priority as we talk about sovereign AI within the continent. To say, for more informal lingo, how do we deal with sovereignty as family members before we start dealing with people on the outside, So I think we need those collaborative sovereignty, AI sovereignty frameworks to accompany the AFCFTA as more African countries continue to, try to adopt AI, leverage DPI to advance their digital economies and things like that. So that's what I think, would help move, beyond the narrow focus on data residency. Because to be honest, I think this data residency conversation is like, is a response, is a knee-jerk reaction to the risk. So it's just like, oh, our data must be with us, but location is not sovereignty. So I think we just need collaborative AI sovereignty frameworks that accompany the AFCFTA and reflect the African realities and respect the differences within the nations that uphold the continent. That's what I think that we need.
Thank you very much, Toyin. Location is not sovereignty. Ownership is. Thank you very much for today. Thank you to your class. Thank you, Toyin. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Olamide. It's been an amazing session. Even as an AI novice, I think this session has gone very far in instructing and telling us what we need to know, especially around sovereign AI and all of that. So thank you also. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for your contributions. I could see that the chatbot was really active with people contributing and joining the session. This is what we want. This is what we're here for. Thank you for your questions. It's been an amazing session. And I hope that the next time that we call that you answer. So thank you so much for joining this session today. And the theme for this session was Beyond the Cloud, Sovereign AI Governance and the Future of Intelligent Enterprise in Nigeria and Africa. But you know what? The conversation does not end here. This session was recorded, so it's definitely going to be posted so that you can always go back. You can listen to this conversation again. If you have questions, you can always just go back to listen to this conversation. Outside of that, you can follow all of us on our social media platforms. You can follow Discussio on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. You can also follow our panelists. Toyin, please tell people your social media platform, but whichever one is preferable for you to follow, so they can follow you or connect with you as the case may be.
Okay, thank you. LinkedIn is where I think we can connect. Toyin Bamidele, but in bracket Batel, Batel. Yeah, you can connect with me there. I'm not very active on social media, but I think my Instagram and X is Batel the brand. I just consume. I'm not very active online, but my LinkedIn, sometimes I share my thoughts, or you can engage me in the DM, WhatsApp, I guess. But Toyin Bamidele as it appears on your screen, but in brackets Batel, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Toyin. Theophilus also, how can I connect with you?
Yeah, I'm just you can only find me on LinkedIn. But like Tony, I don't I don't even make statements there. You can I barely go there for anything, but we could connect definitely, and on a good day probably we could have a conversation if you need to. Thank you.
Great. So,
Yeah, all right.
Victoria, where can people follow you?
All right. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Techies, they are not on social media, and I think it's also related to me. Although I'm on social media, but you could always reach out to me better on LinkedIn than any other platform. And you can also follow our organization on Instagram to let you help you.
You can connect to me on LinkedIn at Olamide A Daniel and on Instagram at Mide_Daniel. You can also follow Africa Tech Radio on LinkedIn, every other social media platform. You can follow Africa Tech Radio. And on Instagram, you can follow us at ATech Radio. Also for Discussio, you can follow them at Discussio on all social media platforms. We look forward to connecting with you. We look forward to hearing from you. And we look forward to you hearing from us. Until next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Everyone, bye.